Okay, let's try this again. Well, hello, it's Mrs. Eckert, and we are doing Lesson 3 over the absolute value equations. You may probably have done this before, especially in Algebra 1, but we're going to do it a different way that might help you when you get to calculus. It's using the substitution method. So if you look through the steps up above, we're going to substitute u in for the absolute value expression. We'll solve for u, and then we'll replace the u with the absolute value expression. Split it into two equations, solve each equation, and check my answers. So let's go ahead and start off. So if you look, the absolute value of a minus 4 is not by itself. So I want to isolate it. So to isolate it, then I will put u equals absolute value of a minus 4. So we will substitute u in, solve for u, which is u equals 5, and then we're going to substitute the absolute value of a minus 4 back in for u, and then you notice the absolute value bars are isolated. We're going to split it into two equations. So if you remember, the absolute value of a positive number or a negative number will always be positive. So the inside could be equal to 5, or the inside could be equal to negative 5. So we're going to solve each of these by adding 4, and I get 9 and negative 1. So we're going to check each of these answers. So when I check, I'm going to check a equals 9, and we're going to go ahead and go all the way back to the beginning. Substitute 9 in, and we're going to see if we get 0. So we get the absolute value of 5 minus 5. Does that equal 0? And yes, 5 minus 5 does equal 0. Okay, then we're going to try absolute value with a equals negative 1. So negative 1 minus 4. Absolute value of that, and we're going to subtract 5. So I get the absolute value of negative 5 minus 5. So I get 5 minus 5 does equal 0 again. So we know that our answers are correct. Okay, let's head on up, and we will move this up, and let's go ahead and do the second one, which happens to be the last one on this page. Okay, so first things first, we're going to go u equals the absolute value of x plus 2. So we'll substitute u in, so 3u minus 1 equals 8. 3u equals 9, and then u equals 3. We're going to resubstitute the absolute value of x plus 2 back in for the u, and if you notice it's isolated again, so we're going to split it into two. The inside could be equal to 3, or the inside could be equal to negative 3, because when I take the absolute value of 3 or negative 3, I get positive 3. We'll subtract 2 from each part, and I get x is 1 or negative 5. So these are the two problems or answers I'm going to check. So we'll go back to our red, and we'll check. So we're going to check x equals 1. So if you look, we get 3 times 1 plus 2 minus 1. Does that equal 8? Well, 3 times the absolute value of 3 minus 1, does that equal 8? 3 times 3 minus 1 does equal 8. Okay, so now let's check x is negative 5. So you get 3 times negative 5 plus 2, and then we'll subtract 1. So 3 times the absolute value of negative 3 minus 1 would be 3 times 3, because the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. And we get 8 equals 8 here and here. So I know my answer is correct. Okay, so let's go ahead and go down to the next one, number 3. Now, if you notice on this one, number 3 is actually it's already isolated, so we don't have to use a u here. So since it's isolated, we're just going to split it. So when we split it, we're going to go the inside could be equal to 4x plus 5, or the inside could be equal to the opposite of 4x plus 5. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to distribute that. So let's go ahead and do this one. I'm just going to move the right side over to the left. So you get negative x, and I'm going to move the 2 over to the right. So I get negative x equals 3. Divide by -1, I get x is -3. This one I get 3x plus 2 equals the opposite of 4x minus 5. So again, I'm going to move the 4x over to the left, and I'm going to subtract the 2. So I get 7x equals -7. X is -1. So what we're going to do is we're going to check these two answers, and we'll see how we did. So if I check, I'm going to check x equals -3 first. So we get the absolute value of 3 times -3 plus 2 equals 4 times -3 plus 5. There we go. Let me go back here a little bit. -3 plus 5. So this would be 3 times -3 is -9, so -9 plus 2 is -7. And the absolute value of -7 is 7. So 7 equals -12 plus 5. 7 equals -7, which is not true. So that means -3 does not work. Okay, so let's try x equals -1. So if we go, we get the absolute value of 3 times -1 plus 2. Does that equal 4 times -1 plus 5. So the absolute value of -3 plus 2 is the absolute value of -1, which equals -1 or +1. And does that equal -4 plus 5? And it actually does. 1 does equal 1. So -1 is my answer. Okay, so if we move this on up, it looks like we only have 2 more left. This one's got a fraction. We'll love that one, won't we? So let's go ahead and start. Now this particular one does not have the absolute value isolated. So let's go ahead and we're going to put u equals the absolute value of 1/2 x plus 3. So if I get -2/3 u equals -1, I'm going to multiply, let me switch to colors here, multiply by -3 over 2, -3 over 2, so I get u equals 3/2. Okay, so if we go back to our blue, we're going to substitute the absolute value expression in for u, so I get 1/2 x plus 3, the absolute value of it, and that equals 3/2. So if I split it, I get the inside equals 3/2, or the inside equals -3/2. So if I subtract 3, I get 1/2 x equals -1/2, which is -3/2. Multiply each side by 2 over 1, so I get x is -3. Second one, subtract 3, so I get 1/2 x equals, so that would be -3 plus another -3/2, so that would be -4.5, which is -9/2. Multiply by 2, I get x is -9. So we're going to check these two problems, or answers I should say. I keep saying problems. So here's my check. So we're going to substitute x equals -3. So we get -2/3, 1/2 times -3 plus 3 equals -1. So 1/2 of -3 is -3/2, which is -1.5. So -1.5 plus 3 is +1.5, which is 3/2. So then -2/3 times 3/2, it cancels, and I get -1 equals -1. So that one works. So we know that -3 works. Now we got to do x equals -9. So I'm going to move this over a little bit. Let's do our check over here. Okay, so if we go through, we do -2/3. Absolute value, I'm going to have to go down and see. 1/2 x plus 3. Let's keep going over here. So 1/2 times x would be negative 9 plus 3. So we get negative 2/3. That would be negative 9/2, which is negative 4.5, plus 3 would be negative 1.5, which is 3/2. So we get negative 2/3 times the absolute value of negative 3/2, which is 3/2, equals negative 1, and you do get negative 1 equals negative 1. So if I shrink this up, we know that both of our answers worked. So we know that our answer is correct there. Okay, let's do the last one. Last one, here we go. Okay, so we don't need to isolate our bars because they're already isolated. We don't know if this is going to be positive over here or negative because not quite sure what x is, so it could end up positive. So we're going to go, we're going to take the inside and go 3x minus 6 equals negative 4x minus 8. Or we got 3x minus 6 equals the opposite of negative 4x minus 8. So I'm going to add the 4x and add the 6. So I get 7x equal negative 2. X is negative 2/7. I'm going to distribute, so 3x minus 6 equals 4x plus 8. Subtract the 4x and then add 6. So I get negative x equals 14. X is negative 14 or negative 2/7. Okay, so here we go. We're going to move this up a little bit. Okay. Still can see that. So we're going to do the check. So let's do x equal negative 14 first. So it's absolute value 3 times negative 14 minus 6. Absolute value equals negative 4 times negative 14 minus 8. Well, 3 times negative 14 is 2, negative 42, minus 6 is the absolute value of negative 48, which is 48. That's 56 minus 8, which is 48, and 48 does equal 48. So I know negative 14 works. Okay, so now we need to do one more, and our lesson will be done. So how about x equals negative 2/7? May have to move this over a little bit. Okay, let's see if we slide it down. Here we go. Okay, so if we go absolute value of 3 times negative 2/7 minus 6, does that equal negative 4 times negative 2/7 minus 8? So 3 times negative 2/7 is negative 6/7, and negative 6/7 minus 6, and 6 would be 42/7, so that would be 48/7. So that would be negative 48/7, which is 48/7. That would be 8/7 minus 8. Well, 8 would be 56/7. So negative, so that's negative 48/7. So that does not work. So negative 2/7 would not be my answer. If both of the answers would not work, then it would be a no solution. Okay? The other thing I want to point out is if I have an absolute value of anything and it equals a negative number, the absolute value has to be isolated, then it's a no solution because the absolute value can never, ever, ever be a negative number. So I hope you got that, understood it, and we will see you soon.